Let's go back to May 17th, 1972, 52 years ago. The sheriff's office was called to a decomposing body near a homeless camp by the overpass on Highway 17. And that was it. There were no rings, no identification, nothing. Had zero idea where this man came from. The autopsy was completed and we certainly determined that he was a victim of murder. He'd been shot twice in the head. Still no information. He was buried in a pauper's grave, and that's where he stayed for decades. And along the way, we picked up some information. We picked up information from a guy by the name of Clarence Williams. Clarence Williams had been in state prison, and he had befriended a guy and started talking with him. The guy, by the way, was in state prison for another murder. The guy told him that me and my buddy, Edgar Todd and Clarence Ingram, had met a man in Winter Haven. They were living in the Eloise area at the time. And they met him at a bar. They got into the victim's white Chevrolet, were riding around. The victim made them mad. Clarence Ingram handed Edgar Todd a gun and said, "Shoot him." So Clarence Ingram's in prison telling this to our witness, Charles Williams, who's dead. He said, so we shot him, we dumped him near a canal so that the turtles would eat him. We took all of his rings, all of his belongings, and his car, and he was a mechanic, and we had about $500 worth of mechanics tools, high-end mechanics tools. Clarence sold those tools to his brother, Johnny Ingram. Then the car was taken to Michigan. Well, interestingly enough, the car was sold in Michigan in 1972 for $500. We found where a traffic citation had been issued to Clarence in Michigan in the right time frame. So all of this information came together, shot twice in the head. Clarence Williams, who came forward to tell us this information about 1974, was accurate with everything. But there wasn't enough put together in 1974 to charge either of them. So the case languished. Now let's fast forward. DNA comes on the scene because there was no DNA back in the day. Our detectives filed for a court order and exhumed this John Doe body in order to get DNA, and we did. So we took the DNA and put it in the CODIS database, and there were no hits. We still didn't know. We had now DNA of this unknown person, but no one in the CODIS database, which is a federal database, knew anything about him. Along comes the new technology that's tied to Ortha, and they figured out that our victim was Mac Proctor. He was in his 40s at the time. And Ortha was able to determine this because they did a DNA workup and they went into the public-facing databases and found that his son was potentially a guy by the name of Wright Proctor from Georgia. We went to Wright Proctor in Georgia and interviewed him, and he said he didn't know a lot about his dad, but his dad was a heavy drinker and was a very good mechanic and moved around a lot. So when he was murdered in Winter Haven, Florida, he was originally from Georgia, had no contacts here. The detective, Manus Waters, that was assigned the case at the time was a very good homicide detective for that era, but he still wasn't able to put the case together. So after 52 years, my detectives, using this advanced DNA technology, determined that the victim was in fact Mac Proctor. Well, Mac Proctor obviously is deceased from this vicious murder. So we look for Clarence Ingram. We find that he's deceased. He died a long, long time ago. In fact, he died in 1995. Edgar Todd, who actually was the trigger man, died in 2015. So we go, well, maybe Johnny Ingram's still alive, so we can hunt him down. And Johnny Ingram is deceased. He died in 2018. So all of our suspects are those who derived from the murder or deceased. We've identified Mac Proctor and have been able to tell the story to Wright, his son, about what happened. You know, it's a shame that we don't have the opportunity to prosecute Clarence Ingram and Edgar Todd for their vicious, violent murder. We thought about going to their grave and telling them that they were under arrest and decided they probably wouldn't talk to us anyway. So they're all deceased, but we have finally closed another old case, this one 52 years ago. The murder occurred, and in 2024, we positively identified the victim and the suspects via a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. We're thankful for Clarence Williams, who died in 2018, our witness, for giving us very good details from this murder, and he actually took the confession from Clarence in Rayford, the state prison. Okay?
So, Sheriff, how did the victim's son react to finding out that this had happened to his father? How did this provide closure?
Well, the victim wasn't real close to his son because he was kind of a, if you will, a wow person back in the day. He was an exceptionally talented mechanic. He could work any place, and he moved around a lot. So his son really didn't know him very well, but they always wondered what happened to him because he just literally disappeared off of the face of the earth. So now we know. And they were pleased to have that chapter of their family history brought to a close.
How many cases, and it might be hard, to say off the top of your head, but how many cold cases has Ortham helped solve?
Well, this is the second or third one for us, and we're working with them on one or two more right now. See, the beautiful thing is, back in the day, they didn't cremate bodies. We're going to run into a problem in modern times if the county has to now take care of the remains because the family can't or won't. Now they use, the cremation method. Well, had he been cremated as opposed to buried in a pauper's grave, there would have been no DNA, and we would have just been at the end of the line. But with this beautiful DNA process now, we're able to bring closure to families who have wondered for decades what happened to their loved one.
And how impossible would have this case been to solve if not for that DNA evidence?
We would have no idea who our victim is. None, zero, because Wright lives in Georgia, and that's what's so important back in the day when we didn't have the science. The first thing you have to do every time is identify your victim, because you've got to have a starting point. Who is this person and where do they come from? Well, the detectives in 1972 could never determine who this guy was. They put out, as archaic or old-fashioned as it was, they would say at the time through the media, hey, we got this body, we got this man, he's in his 40s, he's died a violent death, are you missing a loved one? But why he's down here in Florida, in 1972, the communication is not going to get to Georgia, and you don't have social media where you're scouring social media as you can now around the world of people missing and where may they be. So there was no one to tie him from Central Florida to the far northeast corner of Georgia. And now we have all of that. Now, today, even absent DNA, with the social media we have, we more than likely could get leads on this person by going on different websites and different Facebook pages where people have said, I've lost my loved one, do you know where they are? None of that existed back in the day. I was in charge of criminal investigations in 1982. I was a captain. I look back at those days today with everything we have and go, my goodness, how did we ever solve a murder in 1982? Well, if we didn't get a fingerprint, and we didn't get a confession, and we didn't get good circumstantial evidence, we didn't. And that's why this man was unidentified for 52 years. But when we reinter him, and we will, our charity will also put a marker identifying this man now has an identity. May he rest in peace forever.